They said she makes the best barbecue in Port Harcourt. Perfectly seasoned, smoky, with flavors that made your mouth water just thinking about it. From the first bite, people were obsessed. Lines formed outside her shop every single day. Customers traveled from neighboring communities just to taste her barbecue. Within weeks, Grace's grill became legendary. But here's what nobody knew. The fish came from the river behind her shop. Every morning, a mysterious sack would appear at her door. Fresh fish. Premium quality. More than she could ever afford. And with each piece she sold, young women in the community began to die. Strange deaths. Unexplainable deaths. Their bodies covered in scale-like marks, their eyes turned pale gray like dead fish. All of them had eaten from Grace's grill within days of their death. Was it coincidence? Bad luck? Or was something sinister swimming beneath the surface of her success? This is the story of Grace Okafor and the cursed barbecue shop by the river. Her name was Grace Okafor, 26 years old, and she arrived in Port Harcourt with nothing but 2 suitcases and a broken heart. If you want to know how desperation can open doors to darkness, hit that subscribe button now and comment right now telling us where you're watching from and what your local time is right now. 6 months earlier, Grace Okafor sat on a bus heading to Port Harcourt, her entire life packed into 2 worn suitcases. She was leaving Abuja, leaving behind the friends who betrayed her, the family who disappointed her, and the fiancé who vanished with her savings 3 weeks before their wedding. At 26, she felt ancient with failure. But in her heart burned one final spark of hope, a fresh start. The small community in Port Harcourt sat alongside a waterside, its houses clustered together like old friends sharing secrets. Grace found a modest room to rent and immediately began planning her comeback. She would open a barbecue business, Grace's Grill, she'd call it. She'd always been good at cooking, and barbecue was popular. It was simple, achievable, and honest work. But reality struck hard when she began searching for a shop space. Her remaining savings, barely 200,000 naira, couldn't secure anything decent. Every landlord quoted prices triple what she could afford. On her 5th day in the community, as Grace sat outside her room looking defeated, her neighbor Mercy approached with a warm smile. "Still looking for a shop?" Mercy asked, settling down beside her. At 26, Mercy was close to Grace's age and had a kind, open face. "Everything's too expensive," Grace sighed. "I'm beginning to think this was a mistake." Mercy studied her for a moment, then said carefully, "There's an old warehouse by the river. It's been abandoned for 30 years, long before I was born. Nobody uses it, nobody wants it. It might work for you." Grace's eyes lit up. "Really? Why hasn't anyone taken it?" Mercy hesitated, her smile fading slightly. People say things about that river. Superstitious talk. But if you're not bothered by old stories, the space is there." Grace wasn't bothered. She was desperate. And desperation has a way of making people deaf to warnings. The next morning, Grace walked along the riverside path until she found it, a small warehouse structure that looked like time had forgotten it. 30 years of neglect showed in every rusted nail and dusty corner. Spider webs stretched across the ceiling like lace curtains, and the air inside smelled of abandonment. But Grace saw potential. The space was perfect, large enough for her grill setup, close enough to the community, and best of all, free. She spent 3 hours transforming that warehouse. She swept, scrubbed, and wiped until it sparkled. By evening, using her remaining savings, she'd purchased a large grill, charcoal, seasonings, and her first batch of fish and chicken. She painted a simple sign, "Grace's Grill, Best Barbecue by the Riverside." As she stood back admiring her work, Grace felt genuine hope for the first time in months. She didn't notice how the river behind her shop seemed unusually still. She didn't notice how no birds flew near the building. She didn't notice the silence that hung over the water like a held breath. She opened for business the next day with a bright smile and high expectations. Nobody came. For 2 months, Grace lived in a nightmare worse than anything she'd experienced in Abuja. Every morning, she'd arrive at her shop, fire up her grill, and prepare beautiful, aromatic barbecue. The smell would drift into the community, making mouths water. But nobody came. Not one customer. She tried offering free samples. People would see her approaching with her tray and quickly cross the street or shut their doors. She'd stand there, confused and humiliated, holding rejected food. "Please, just try it," she'd beg. "It's free." But they'd shake their heads, fear flickering in their eyes. "We don't eat from that place," an old woman finally told her. "That river took too much from us already." Only Mercy would visit, buying small portions and trying to encourage her. "Don't give up, Grace. Something will change." But Grace was drowning. She could barely afford to feed herself. Her clothes grew looser as she skipped meals. Her rent was due, and her landlord was losing patience. Every night, she'd carry her chair to the riverbank, sit facing the water, and cry until her throat hurt. "God, why did you bring me here?" she'd sob. "Was it to watch me fail again?" The river would respond with silence, its dark surface reflecting only her misery. Yet somewhere deep inside, Grace refused to quit entirely. Maybe tomorrow would be different. Maybe next week. Maybe. But after 2 months of maybes, even hope starts to die. It was a Wednesday evening. Grace was packing up her unused supplies, moving mechanically through the motions. The sun had set, casting the riverside in purple shadows. Then came the knock. Grace froze. In 2 months, nobody had knocked on her door seeking service. Especially not after dark. The knock came again, soft but persistent. Her heart hammering, Grace moved toward the door. "Who's there?" No answer. Just another knock. As she opened the door slowly, Grace's gaze dropped, and her breath caught in her throat. Standing before her was a girl who appeared about 13 years old, but nothing else about her was ordinary. Her skin had an unnatural shimmer, her long black hair dripped water onto the ground, and her white gown clung to her, soaking wet. But it was her eyes that made Grace's blood run cold. They were too ancient, too knowing for a child's face. And when the girl stepped forward, Grace saw it. Where the gown ended, instead of feet, there was the unmistakable scaled tail of a fish. "Don't scream," the girl said softly, gliding past Grace into the shop without invitation. "I'm here to help you." Grace stood paralyzed, her mouth opening and closing like one of her unsold fish. The girl turned to face her, water pooling around her. "My name is Amara. I've been watching you, Grace. Every tear you've cried by the river, every prayer you've whispered into the water. Your suffering troubles me." What are you?" Grace managed to whisper. "A friend," Amara replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "A friend who can make all your problems disappear. You want customers. You want wealth. You want everyone in this community to see you as successful." Grace found herself nodding despite her terror. "Then I have a simple proposal," Amara continued. "Starting tomorrow, you'll find a sack of fish at your door every morning. These are special fish, the finest you'll ever see. Sell them in your barbecue. That's all. Just sell them." "And in return?" Grace asked, her business instincts fighting through her fear. "In return, you'll have more customers than you can handle. More money than you've ever dreamed. The life you've always wanted." It sounded too good to be true. Grace knew that. But desperation is a powerful drug, and she'd been high on it for months. Will there be any side effects? For the customers, I mean. Amara's expression remained neutral. "You'll discover everything you need to know when the time comes. But you must decide now. Do you accept?" Grace should have asked more questions. She should have demanded details. She should have shown Amara the door and run far away. Instead, she heard herself say, "Yes, I accept." Amara's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed just slightly too sharp. "Excellent. You've made the right choice, Grace." The girl turned and walked out of the shop. Grace followed her to the door, watching as Amara moved toward the river. At the water's edge, Amara didn't stop or pause. She simply walked into the dark water, and it swallowed her without a splash, without a ripple, as if welcoming her home. Grace stood there for a long time, wondering if she'd imagined the entire encounter. But the wet footprints on her floor told her otherwise. Grace barely slept that night. She kept replaying the encounter, her mind swinging between terror and excitement. Had she just made a deal with something supernatural? Was she losing her mind? But when she arrived at her shop the next morning, all doubts evaporated. There, sitting in back of her shop, was a large burlap sack. Grace approached it cautiously, then dragged it inside. When she opened it, her jaw dropped. Inside were varieties of fish she'd only seen in expensive markets: Titus fish, croaker, mackerel, barracuda, all fresh, all premium quality. She estimated the sack's contents were worth at least 500,000 naira, maybe more. Her hands shaking with a mixture of excitement and dread. Grace began preparing. She seasoned the fish with her special blend of spices, fired up her grill, and soon the most incredible aroma filled the air. She'd barely placed the first batch on the grill when a woman approached. "I'll take 2 medium-sized fish," the woman said, reaching for her purse. Grace stared at her, momentarily speechless. This was the same woman who'd refused her free samples 2 weeks ago. "That'll be 6,000 naira, Grace said, her voice shaking. The woman paid without complaint. Before Grace could process it, 4 more customers arrived. Then 10. Then 20. By midday, there was a line outside Grace's grill. People who'd avoided her for months now waited patiently for her barbecue, praising the taste, the quality, the incredible flavor. "This is the best fish I've ever had," one man exclaimed. "You've been blessed," another woman said. "God has really remembered you." By evening, Grace had sold everything. She counted her earnings with trembling hands, over 800,000 naira in a single day. She'd made more in one day than she'd earned in her entire time in Port Harcourt. Grace sat in her empty shop and cried. But this time, they were tears of joy mixed with confusion. Had this really happened? Was this truly a blessing? "It's just fish," she told herself. "Good quality fish. Nothing more." But deep down, in a place she refused to examine, she knew better. The next morning, another sack appeared. Grace didn't hesitate. She dove into her work with newfound energy. Day after day, the pattern continued. Fresh fish every morning, hundreds of customers every day, money flooding in faster than she could count it. Within a month, Grace's Grill had transformed into the most popular food spot in the community. She renovated the warehouse with modern equipment and even hired 3 assistants to help with the overwhelming demand. Her personal life transformed too. She moved into a better apartment, bought new clothes, sent money to her struggling mother in Abuja, and finally felt like her life had meaning. The same people who'd rejected her free samples now called her blessed. "Sister Grace, you're so favored," they'd say. "What's your secret?" She'd smile and reply, "It's God's blessing. Just God." But every morning when she found that mysterious sack, and every night when she counted her profits, Grace felt a cold knot of fear in her stomach. This didn't feel like God's blessing. It felt like something else. She pushed those thoughts away. "Don't be ungrateful," she'd scold herself. "You prayed for success, and it came. Accept it." So she did. She accepted it all, the money, the fame, the respect. She just didn't know the price that was being paid. The first death came exactly 30 days after Grace's Grill opened. A 19-year-old girl named Kayamaka, daughter of Mr. Okonkwo, was found dead in her bedroom. She'd been perfectly healthy the night before, laughing with her family after dinner. By morning, she was cold and stiff, her eyes open but unseeing, strange scale-like marks covering her arms, and her eyes turned a pale, lifeless gray. The community mourned, but life moved on. Death happens. Then came the second. Then the third. Then more. Within 2 months of Grace's success, 8 young women between the ages of 16 and 32 had died mysteriously. Same symptoms, scale-like marks, gray eyes, no clear cause of death. The community was gripped by panic. Parents began locking their daughters indoors after 6 p.m. Church prayer meetings multiplied. Rumors spread like wildfire. It's a curse. The river is angry again. Something evil has awakened. Grace heard the rumors at her shop, but she pushed them aside. It's not connected to me, she told herself. It can't be. But then Mr. Okonkwo came. It was a Wednesday evening. Grace was closing up when Mr. Okonkwo stormed into her shop, his eyes red and swollen from crying. In his shaking hand, he held a photograph of a beautiful young woman with kind eyes and a bright smile. "My daughter," he said, his voice breaking. "My Kayamaka. She ate your fish 5 days before she died." Grace's heart stopped. "Sir, I'm so sorry for your loss, but her body had marks like fish scales," Mr. Okonkwo continued, moving closer. "Her eyes were gray, like a dead fish's eyes. The doctors have never seen anything like it. And you know what else? Every single girl who's died, all 8 of them, they all ate from your shop within a week of their deaths." The shop suddenly felt very cold. "Sir, that's just a coincidence," Grace said, her voice shaking. "Hundreds of people eat here every day and they're perfectly fine. You can't blame my food." "Then explain this," Mr. Okonkwo shouted, slamming the photograph on her counter. "Explain why only young women are dying. Explain why they all have the same strange symptoms. Explain why it started exactly when you opened this cursed shop by this cursed river." Grace had no answers. She could only shake her head, tears forming in her eyes. "I don't know. I swear, I don't know." Mr. Okonkwo stared at her for a long moment, then his anger seemed to drain away, replaced by deep, soul-crushing grief. He collapsed against the wall, sliding down to sit on the floor, and wept like a child. Grace stood frozen, unable to comfort him, unable to defend herself, unable to do anything but face the terrible truth she'd been avoiding. She was involved in this. Somehow, she was responsible. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She sat on her bed, her mind racing. Should I close the shop? Should I run? But if I do, what will Amara do to me? Will she come for me next? She thought about all the money she'd made, the life she'd built. Could she really walk away? Maybe it's just coincidence, she tried to convince herself. Maybe these deaths have nothing to do with my fish. Maybe I'm being paranoid. But even as she thought it, she knew it was a lie. Exhaustion finally overtook her, and Grace fell into a fitful sleep. The nightmare came immediately. She found herself standing by the river at night. The water was black as oil, and the moon hung heavy and red in the sky. Then, one by one they emerged. Young women, 8 of them, rising from the water. Their skin was bloated and pale, their hair tangled with seaweed, their eyes empty sockets that somehow still saw. And on their arms, covering their necks, spreading across their faces, fish scales, shimmering in the moonlight. They moved toward her in unison, their movements jerky and wrong, like puppets on tangled strings. "You fed us to her," they said, their voices overlapping, creating a horrible chorus. "You fed us to the goddess." "I didn't know," Grace screamed. "I didn't know." "But you suspected," they replied, getting closer. "You knew something was wrong, but you chose the money. You chose yourself." Their cold hands grabbed her arms, her legs, her neck. They were pulling her toward the water. "No. Please. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." They dragged her to the water's edge. "Come join us, Grace. Come pay your debt." As they pulled her under, water filling her lungs, Grace felt scales beginning to form on her own skin. She woke up screaming, gasping for air, her body drenched in sweat. She touched her arms frantically, checking for scales. Her skin was normal. But the terror remained. The clock read 3:47 a.m. Grace didn't sleep again that night. Grace didn't know it, but someone had been watching, someone who understood far more than anyone else in the community. Papa Benjamin was 75 years old, a retired Anglican church reverend who'd lived in the community for over 40 years. His late wife used to call him the spiritual eye of the community, because he could sense things others missed. Recently, Papa Benjamin had noticed disturbing signs. His white doves, birds he'd kept for decades, refused to fly near Grace's grill. Whenever he tried to direct them that way, they'd scatter violently, cooing in distress. Then came the dream. Papa Benjamin saw young women eating fish, but their reflections in the water showed them being dragged underwater by dark, scaled hands. He saw a warehouse by the river, the same warehouse that had been abandoned 30 years ago after Pastor David banished the river goddess. He woke knowing exactly what was happening. The next morning, despite his old bones protesting, Papa Benjamin walked to Grace's grill. It was early, before opening time. Grace was just arranging her space when she heard a knock. She turned to find an elderly man with kind but penetrating eyes, leaning on a walking stick. "Papa Benjamin," Grace said, recognizing him from church. "What brings you here?" Papa Benjamin studied her for a long moment. "My daughter, I don't know what spirit has blessed your business, but hear me clearly. When God blesses, it comes with peace. But when the water blesses, it comes with a bill that must be paid in blood." Grace felt her knees weaken. "Papa, I don't understand." "I think you do," Papa Benjamin said gently. "Tell me, do you sleep peacefully at night? Or do the faces of the dead visit you in your dreams?" Grace's eyes filled with tears. "It's God's blessing, Papa. My business is God's blessing." "Then why do your hands tremble every time you open that sack of fish?" Papa Benjamin asked quietly. "Why do you flinch when people mention the deaths? Why do you look like a woman trapped in a cage of her own making?" Grace had no answer. Papa Benjamin nodded slowly. "I've seen this before, child. 30 years ago, this community made a terrible covenant with darkness. It cost us dearly. We thought we were free, but darkness is patient. It waits for desperate souls. It waits for people hungry enough to stop asking questions." He turned to leave, then paused. "When you're ready to face the truth, come find me. But don't wait too long. The water always collects its debts, and the bill is coming due." Papa Benjamin walked away, leaving Grace standing and shaking. Despite the warning, despite the nightmares, despite everything, Grace opened her shop that day. The sack of fish was waiting. The customers came in droves. The money kept flowing. Desperation had brought her here. Fear kept her trapped. But soon, she'd have no choice but to face the truth. 2 more girls died that week. The community's terror reached fever pitch. Then, on a quiet Thursday morning, Amara returned. Grace was alone in the shop, preparing for the day, when she looked up and saw the girl standing in the corner. But this time, Amara wasn't dripping water. She looked almost completely human, except for her eyes, those ancient, knowing eyes. "You've done well," Amara said with a smile. "But the goddess needs more. The time has come for you to know the full truth." Grace's stomach twisted. What truth? Amara reached into her white gown and pulled out a small leather pouch. "Special spice." Add it to your fish from now on. It will make your business grow even bigger." She placed it on Grace's counter. "I don't want it," Grace whispered. "Yes, you do," Amara said calmly. "But more importantly, you need to understand what you've been part of." She moved closer. "Every fish you sell carries a piece of the river goddess's power. The young women who die are not just dying, their souls are being harvested by the goddess to regain her full strength." The world seemed to tilt. Grace grabbed the counter for support. "No. No, that can't be." 30 years ago, Amara continued, her voice taking on a storytelling quality, this community had a covenant with the goddess. Every year, on the night of the full moon, they would bring 7 newborn baby girls here, to this very building where you now cook your barbecue. They'd wrap them in white cloth and place them in a circle. At midnight, the goddess would rise and take them into the river. This happened for generations. Grace felt sick. That's horrible." "Yes," Amara agreed. Mothers wept, but they complied out of fear. Until one year, a prophet named Pastor David came to the community. He led 40 days of fasting and prayer. They broke the covenant through intense spiritual warfare. The goddess was banished, stripped of most of her power, and sealed in the depths. So why is she back? Find out the reason in part 2. If this story touched you or taught you something valuable, please subscribe to our channel for part 2 of this video. Drop a comment right now telling us where you're watching from and what your local time is right now.